gentle breeze blows across lush grassy plains. Rivers meander through untouched landscapes, dense forests and seemingly endless swamps. A secluded world whose natural beauty was cherished and protected by its inhabitants. But beneath the surface lay a unique treasure that attracted the attention of powerful outsiders, turning this world into the theater of a conflict that would soon spread across the entire galaxy. Welcome to Naboo. Naboo was a lush, green world. Its surface was covered with fertile grassy plains. Crystal clear rivers flowing down from the mountain ranges crisscrossed the flat landscapes, winding around isolated hills or plunging down in impressive waterfalls where the landscape was interrupted by deep cliffs. Extensive forests bordered the plains that were home to a wide variety of plants. Another notable feature of Naboo's landscape was the large number of swamps and marshes. The wetlands were often covered in thick fog, filled with the sounds of all kinds of animals. By far the most remarkable feature of the planet was found beneath its surface. Surrounding its solid inner core was a layer of high-energy plasma, a feature unique to Naboo. The unstable plasma was in constant motion, flowing through the planet's crust, shaping the landscape above and melting a network of tunnels, winding through the rock like the pores of a sponge. Over time, most of these tunnels became flooded with seawater. Even small lakes were likely to have underwater openings into the depths of the planet. In the eternal darkness of the caves, various species of fish and amphibians thrived, forming an ecosystem unique in the galaxy. Some predators had developed fluorescent body parts to attract prey, eerie lights dancing in the darkness. Others, such as the OP sea killer and the Colo clawfish, roamed the tunnels equipped with fangs that could pierce even the thickest scales. But one creature eclipsed them all. In the deepest caves of the endless underground labyrinth lived the Sando aqua monster, the undisputed apex predator of the depths. It used its arms or mouth to catch its prey while standing upright on its two hind legs, walking rather than swimming. On rare occasions, young aqua monsters would leap out of a lake to snatch a surprised land animal that was carelessly roaming the shore. Life on the surface of Naboo was similarly diverse. Herds of herbivores such as the calm sharks grazed on the endless plains. Omnivores such as the swift cardu and the tenacious falumpas fed on plants and smaller creatures in the wetlands and swamps. A number of bird species and amphibians lived near bodies of water and fed on small fish that lived in shallow waters. Although the predators on the surface of Naboo were nowhere near as large as their underwater counterparts, there were still some giants to be found under the sky. Fambas were the largest herbivores on Naboo and lived in small groups in the less dense parts of the forests. With their insatiable appetites, they were known to sometimes even knock over entire trees with their massive bodies to feast on the treetops. However, the largest animals above the waterline were found in the air. The Peko Peko was a flying reptilian. They often traveled in pairs and were revered for their beautiful feathers. While most were not much larger than a large bird, some of the subspecies, such as the Peko albatross, could reach enormous wingspans that dwarfed most other animals on the surface of Naboo. In addition to its diverse wildlife, Naboo was home to the Gungans, amphibious humanoids who were considered the only intelligent species to have evolved on Naboo. Early nomadic tribes often had to defend themselves against the aggressive Weemoks, large primates known for their unpredictable temper and tendency to become easily aggressive towards anything they perceived as a threat or potential next meal. As the Gungans began building their first settlements, they had great difficulty defending their makeshift dwellings against the Bursas, semi-intelligent carnivores that had evolved alongside them. The large, hairy quadrupeds lived in family groups, and since the Gungans had given up their nomadic lifestyle, had developed a habit of attacking their primitive villages. It soon became clear to the tribes that defending their settlements would require much more effort than any of them could muster on their own. What followed was probably the first time that several Gungan tribes united under a common goal: to drive out the Bursas and defend their settlements with combined forces. Over a long period of time, the Gungans managed to drive the Bursas almost to extinction. At some point during the Gungans' first steps towards civilization, Naboo was colonized by an alien race known only as the Elders. In their colonization efforts, the Elders came into conflict with the Gungans and drove their civilization into the planet's forests and wetlands. The Elders erected stone structures and monuments on Naboo, of which only ruins remained thousands of years after their mysterious disappearance, easily recognizable by the striking large head statues, a typical element of their architecture. The Gungans later incorporated these ruins into their folklore and used them as sacred sites. Naboo was located in a region of the mid-rim of the galaxy that was explored relatively late in history. More than 20,000 years after the founding of the Galactic Republic, the Dark Wars, a series of conflicts between the Jedi and the Sith, ended with the collapse of the Sith Empire. The new era of peace ushered in an age of prosperity for most members of the Republic. This prompted the monarch of the core world Griswold to fund an expedition to map unexplored parts of the galaxy. Naboo was one of the planets discovered during these expeditions. Nearly 4,000 years before the Battle of Yavin, about half a century after its discovery, a colonization ship crash-landed on Naboo. For months, the surviving passengers wandered across the planet's surface trying to survive, until they reached an idyllic mountain range where they founded Deja Peak, the first human settlement on Naboo. Coming from a monarchy, they chose a woman as their leader and first queen of their new home world. However, the queen refused to establish a dynasty of monarchs, and so it was decided that the ruler of Naboo's human civilization would be elected by the people. After an initial brief period of conflict between the Gungans and the human settlers, clashes between the two groups became rare. After centuries of passing down stories of their ancestors' conflicts with the Elders, the Gungans decided to keep their distance and avoid contact. They retreated further into the forests and wetlands. Several centuries later, rivalries between competing tribes had divided the Gungan civilization. At the peak of the conflict, the Gungan city of Otosankur was attacked and completely destroyed by one of the largest tribes. Survivors from the destroyed city subsequently managed to unite the other smaller clans that had also been attacked and founded the Great Army of the Gungans. Together, the united tribes managed to defeat the aggressors in their underwater city, almost completely destroying it in the process. In its place, deep in the waters of a large lake, Otoganga, the largest Gungan city on the planet, was built as a permanent reminder of this violent conflict that had ultimately united them as a people. About 1,000 years after the first humans arrived on Naboo, the city of Kadara was founded. Instead of provoking conflict with the Gungans or avoiding them, the citizens of Kadara choose to coexist with the indigenous people of Naboo, inviting them to live in the city. Although civilization flourished on Naboo, the human population deliberately kept the planet isolated from the rest of the galaxy. Having witnessed centuries of wars, they adhered to a policy of minimal contact with other worlds. In the centuries that followed, various groups of spice miners from other planets attempted to establish bases on Rory, Naboo's second largest moon. They were looking for a rare variation of spice on the jungle moon, putting the system on the map for a number of criminal organizations that threatened to disrupt Naboo's peaceful isolation. 2,000 years before the Clone Wars era, the then king of Naboo pushed for the colonization of the jungle moon. Although the settlement did not take place on the scale he had originally envisioned, the city of Narmal was founded on Rory and named after him to honor his achievements. Over time, many smaller farming communities sprang up, and Rory became an important part of Naboo's food production. What followed were 1,000 years of peace for Naboo. But over time, the power of the monarchy slowly waned, and the governments of several large city-states grew increasingly powerful. Tensions rose as conflicting interests could no longer be solved by the ruling monarch. The crisis escalated into violent conflict. Wars of unprecedented scale broke out between rival human factions and soon engulfed all of Naboo in a period that later became known as the Time of Suffering. Amidst all these events, Naboo was approached by diplomats from the Galactic Republic and offered membership. Despite its internal conflicts, Naboo joined the Republic a little over 3 millennia after the arrival of the first settlers on the planet. It took nearly 200 years of war before one of the factions, led by a man named Jafan, gained the upper hand and defeated the other factions, bringing an end to the Time of Suffering. Under Jafan, who became the first king of the reunified Naboo, the election of monarchs was abolished, and he became the first in a long dynasty to rule the planet. As a symbol of the new era, he ordered the construction of a new capital city. 832 years before the Battle of Yavin, Theed was built from a small farming village in the western grasslands of Naboo, along with a new royal palace in the heart of the city. Perched on the edge of a huge cliff, it overlooked the great waterfall of the river which flowed through the city. The palace consisted of a large central building, the seat of the planet's government, flanked by a series of towers where the monarchs resided. 600 years later, the population of Naboo's moon Rory was struck by a terrible epidemic. A quarantine center was set up and later expanded to accommodate patients for several years. What started as a temporary medical facility slowly transformed into the moon's second largest city, Restus. After hundreds of years of prosperity and expansion, human civilization on Naboo began to spread towards the borders of Gungan territory. Most of the planet's industries benefited from its unique plasma resources, and despite the planet's isolationist policies, technological developments led to increasing trade with other worlds in the Galactic Republic. After millennia of peace between the Gungans and the people of Naboo, a great war broke out 150 years before the Battle of Yavin. Since the humans were unable to break through the Gungans' defenses, the conflict dragged on for more than 15 years until the fighting slowly subsided. However, a few greedy and powerful noble houses, which owned a large part of the planet's industry, reached out to mercenaries from other planets. The mercenary troops attacked the surprised Gungans and fierce fighting ensued again. Both sides suffered heavy losses. When 29 years after the war began, the last heir to the ruling monarchical dynasty was killed in battle, the people of Naboo decided to end the conflict and abolish the hereditary monarchy. A new queen was elected, and the noble houses that had driven the conflict for personal gain lost most of their power. 60 years later, resource surveys discovered a large plasma source beneath the royal city of Theed. The planet's population began to recognize the economic advantage of their planet and, in the next election 2 years later, elected King Tapalo as their next king, who planned to open Naboo to the greater galaxy in order to bring more trade and prosperity to the planet, thus ending the isolationist policy of the last 3,000 years. Under Tapalo, large-scale plasma surveys were conducted throughout Naboo to tap into additional sources. With heavy investment from off-world companies, Naboo's plasma industry was massively expanded. Additional extraction facilities and refineries were built, including a large complex in the center of the capital. The government commissioned intergalactic companies such as the Trade Federation and the Intergalactic Banking Clan to trade with other worlds and sold to them as middlemen. The spaceport at Theed was expanded to handle the increasing volume of goods being shipped to other worlds. Naboo had arrived on the grand stage of intergalactic trade. Politics became increasingly intertwined with the planet's economy. The interests of large corporations suddenly gained weight in every decision. After several years of Tapalo's rule, dissatisfaction grew over the interference of external interests, which seemed to override the voices of the local population, even in local politics. However, the isolationist opposition on Naboo was not strong enough to prevent one of Tapalo's allies from ascending to the throne after him. King Varuna also wanted to expand and further develop interstellar plasma trade, but at least he understood the general dissatisfaction of the population. His goal was to renegotiate the treaty with the Trade Federation, which sold the plasma for many times the price it had purchased it from Naboo. While the Federation argued that the enormous logistical costs of transporting the plasma to other worlds justified the price, the people of Naboo felt cheated out of a large portion of the potential profits that King Varuna had promised would greatly benefit Naboo. More than 10 years later, with no new agreement in place, discontent grew among both King Varuna and the people of Naboo. The king of the peaceful planet ordered the creation of a space fighter corps, with the goal to put Naboo in a position where it had enough military power to block the Federation's trade and thus force it to renegotiate the plasma trade agreement. At the same time, however, the Galactic Republic was debating reforming the Outer Rim free trade zones and removing tax exemptions for the Trade Federation in exchange for lifting restrictions on their private security forces. No force Naboo could muster would have stood a chance against a deregulated Federation army. In the end, King Varuna oversaw the creation of Naboo's Spacefighter Corps, but did not live to witness the further development of the waning crisis. After serious accusations of corruption, he stepped down from the throne and was assassinated shortly thereafter. His elected successor was the young Queen Amidala. Only months into her reign, the crisis King Varuna had been warned of began to unfold. Under the guise of an invitation to renegotiate a new agreement aboard one of their massive transport ships, the Trade Federation lured Queen Amidala away from Naboo. The trap was sprung as soon as the Queen's starship emerged from hyperspace. The Federation vessel immediately departed the system while a group of mercenary fighters attacked, attempting to take the Queen hostage. This attempt was thwarted by the brand new Naboo space fighters, whose pilots successfully protected the Queen's starship. Just a short time later, immediately after the Galactic Republic decided in favor of changes to interstellar trade regulations, the Trade Federation imposed a blockade on Naboo. The blockade not only halted interstellar commerce, but also severed the planet from the vital food production on Rory. After initial attempts to find a diplomatic solution failed, the new Trade Federation droid army launched a full-scale invasion. Naboo's unprepared security forces were vastly outnumbered and quickly overwhelmed. Droid forces seized control of Naboo's major cities and occupied the planetary government within the Theed royal palace. Officially, the Trade Federation claimed that its actions were intended to exert pressure on the largely demilitarized Republic and forced the revocation of the newly imposed taxations. In reality, the Federation also sought to compel the Queen to sign a treaty that would legitimize their occupation of Naboo and grant them full control over the planet's resources, including its valuable plasma reserves. Queen Amidala, however, evaded capture and fled the planet. The Gungans were not spared from the conflict, as access points to several major plasma resources lay within their territories. Once control over Naboo's major cities had been secured, droid forces began systematically locating Gungan settlements and underwater cities. Although the Gungans mounted stronger resistance than the Federation had anticipated, most of their cities fell rapidly under the overwhelming numerical superiority of the droid army. The majority of the Gungans retreated to sacred sites deep within the forests. After a brief period spent in hiding beyond the reach of the Trade Federation, Queen Amidala of Naboo traveled to Coruscant to appeal to the Galactic Senate for intervention. As the effort proved fruitless, the Queen secretly returned to Naboo shortly thereafter. There, she reached out to the Gungans who had also suffered under the Federation's occupation. The combined forces of the Gungan Grand Army and the remaining Royal Security Forces succeeded in freeing the pilots of the Starfighter Corps. These pilots then launched a surprise attack on the droid army's control ship in orbit. The destruction of the control ship disabled the battle droids across the planet, and the Queen's forces were able to reclaim control of Naboo with minimal further resistance. The Gungans and the human population of Naboo celebrated their shared victory, and relations between the two improved from there on. One of the first major peacetime projects undertaken by the newly allied forces was the establishment of a Gungan colony on Omar Da'un, Naboo's largest moon. A small number of human farmers and spice miners also settled on the moon, marking the beginning of a new period of cooperation within the Naboo system. Not all Gungans, however, agreed with the new stance of friendship toward the humans who, since their arrival on Naboo thousands of years earlier, had on multiple occasions employed military force and violence to drive Gungan tribes from their ancestral territories. A significant group of these Gungan extremists migrated to Rory and established a remote settlement deep within the jungles, far removed from any human civilization. After Queen Amidala had completed her second term, Queen Jamilia was elected as her successor. The young monarch guided Naboo through the separatist crisis that engulfed the galaxy. During this period, numerous worlds seceded from the Galactic Republic and joined the rising confederation of independent systems. Queen Jamilia opened Naboo's borders to refugees from separatist worlds and made clear that her planet would remain a member of the Republic. 3 years into Queen Jamilia's reign, the separatist crisis escalated into the Clone Wars, a violent conflict between the Galactic Republic and the Confederation that would soon engulf much of the galaxy. Only a few months after the opening battle on the planet Geonosis, Naboo lost contact with the newly established Gungan colony on its largest moon. An investigation team discovered a group of separatists who had killed all of the Gungans using a newly developed chemical weapon and now intended to launch it towards Naboo. A strike team of Jedi intervened, averting catastrophe for the planet. It soon became apparent that an even greater separatist threat had been concealed on Naboo itself. Shortly after the election of Queen Neutni, who assumed the throne within the first year of the Clone Wars, a secret separatist laboratory was discovered on the planet. The facility had been installed by the Trade Federation, one of the Confederacy's main supporters, during their occupation of Naboo years earlier. Within the laboratory, scientists had recreated a strain of a highly dangerous virus that had caused millions of deaths in an outbreak decades before the Clone Wars. Their plan was to release the virus on Naboo and deliver it to the Confederacy of Independent Systems for use against the Republic. Shortly before the virus could be deployed, a strike team infiltrated the facility and contained the virus. Naboo was spared from major battles for most of the Clone Wars, but other conflicts troubled the peaceful planet just a year into the war. A new Gungan leader rose to power who openly criticized the human-dominated planetary government. Serious unrest erupted, with some tribes even threatening to attack Theed. The crisis was eventually diffused when it was discovered that separatist sympathizers within the Gungan Advisory Council had manipulated the new leader. Once the conspiracy was revealed, the Gungan leader resigned and the long-standing friendship between Gungans and humans was restored. The Confederacy of Independent Systems, however, did not cease its covert operations on Naboo. 2 years after the first Battle of Geonosis, a separatist plot to abduct the Chancellor of the Galactic Republic during a public speech on the planet was uncovered. The group of mercenaries contracted by the Confederacy had been infiltrated by a Jedi, who sabotaged the operation and ensured that the attempted kidnapping failed. Near the end of the Clone Wars, the Separatists' operations on Naboo shifted from covert activities to open aggression. A Separatist strike force landed on the planet and assaulted the royal city of Theed in an attempt to seize control. After a brief but intense engagement in the city, the Republic's clone army succeeded in defeating the attackers and driving the Separatist forces from Naboo. After Queen Neutni resigned, Naboo elected Queen Apailana as their new ruler. The Clone Wars concluded shortly thereafter, but the young queen was immediately confronted with an entirely different challenge under the New Order, which had transformed the democratic Galactic Republic into the authoritarian Galactic Empire. The former Republic clone army garrison on Naboo had been reorganized into a permanent Imperial military presence, and the influence of the new regime was felt throughout the planet. While Queen Apailana remained officially loyal to the new regime, she secretly advised her inner circle to provide refuge for surviving Jedi fleeing Imperial prosecution. Less than a year after the conclusion of the Clone Wars, one of these Jedi assisted the Gungan Grand Army and the people of Naboo in mounting an attack on the Imperial garrison near Theed. The ensuing engagement caused a massive explosion in a storage facility, destroying the entire garrison. This allowed for the attack to be concealed as an accident, thereby avoiding immediate retaliation by the Empire. Some members of the Imperial High Command, however, grew suspicious of the destruction of the Naboo garrison. When, a year later, it was discovered that Queen Apailana had been harboring Jedi on the planet, the Empire launched a full-scale invasion of Naboo. Theed was blockaded, and when the people of Naboo refused to surrender their queen, Imperial forces assaulted the city. Overwhelming the royal defense guards, they advanced into the royal palace. Despite the efforts of a handful of Jedi who had remained on Naboo to aid her escape, Queen Apailana was ultimately killed by Imperial stormtroopers. The Empire moved quickly to install a puppet monarch on Naboo. With Imperial support, Queen Kulantha was able to rule Naboo far longer than the Constitution allowed. Yet, as the years passed and the Empire's grip on the galaxy tightened, her dissatisfaction with the authoritarian order grew. The Imperial presence on Naboo was especially pronounced as the Emperor had commissioned a personal retreat in a remote mountain range on the planet. The entire region was heavily fortified, and whenever the Emperor resided there, often accompanied by members of the Imperial High Command, large numbers of Imperial troops were deployed all across the planet. The Empire also established a secret facility on Naboo where scientists conducted research on superlaser technology, along with a second research laboratory on the planet's moon Rory. The Gungan population on Naboo, concealed within the deep swamps and their hidden underwater cities, posed a persistent challenge to the Empire. On at least one occasion, open battle erupted between Imperial forces and the Gungan Grand Army, resulting in significant losses for the occupying troops. After the destruction of the first Death Star, precise rebel attacks on the secret Imperial laboratory raised questions about a traitor within the ranks of Naboo's government. After a short while, Imperial Command tricked the Queen to confess her connection to a rebel cell and expose the location of their base on Naboo. In a swift strike, the rebels were defeated, and although Queen Kulantha swore loyalty to the Empire, her reign soon came to an end, and her successor ascended to the throne. With the Imperial military increasing their presence on the planet, the Rebel Alliance shifted its focus to Naboo's moon Rory. Trying to steal advanced energy technology from the research laboratory in Restos, Rebel forces clashed with Imperial troops. The battle ended with a massive explosion, destroying the laboratory and surrounding areas. The Empire maintained its tight control over Naboo until the destruction of the second Death Star and the death of the Emperor at the Battle of Endor. Upon learning of the Rebel Alliance's victory in this major engagement, local resistance fighters, joined by several Gungan tribes, launched an uprising on the planet. At its height, Imperial forces had lost control of much of Theed, including the royal palace, and citizens openly celebrated Naboo's newfound freedom in the streets. In the initial confusion following the emperor's death, the local imperial command struggled to respond. Eventually, however, imperial forces regained control, suppressing the revolt with decisive force. Over time, however, imperial control over Naboo weakened as more and more imperial forces withdrew to the home systems of the factions that would later form the imperial remnants. A new queen was elected, and Naboo soon joined the new republic, which had been founded by the Rebel Alliance. The planet became an important stronghold for the Republic and stood as an advocate for peace and cooperation in the galaxy.